Imagine waking up to an absolute nightmare in sleepy Tucson, Arizona, a local woman surviving a hell nobody should ever have to face. Someone snatched her 84-year-old mother right out of her house at midnight. 48 hours later, her husband was suddenly headlining global news. Federal agents tore through her own property just a week after the fact. Literally everything she knew has been swallowed whole by this investigation. Fast forward to today, and Puma County deputies are swarming her street again. Not chasing down some massive fresh lead, though. They're here because of the absolute circus unfolding on her front lawn. Everything I'm about to tell you comes straight from verified public records and named sources. We're talking official statements from Puma County Sheriff's News 4, Tucson KVOA Newsweek, USA, Today, and People magazine. Just to be perfectly clear, authorities haven't officially named any specific YouTubers or internet sleuths regarding these harassment complaints, and obviously nobody mentioned in this breakdown has been charged with an actual crime yet. So why is Annie Guthrie calling the cops over harassment the wildest twist we've seen in weeks? Well, you really need to grasp her exact position right in the dead center of this whole mess. The nightmare started after dinner on January 31st, 2026. 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, a Tucson local for over 50 years, was eating at her daughter Annie's place with her son-in-law Tommaso CIONI. Literally, everyone agrees it was just a normal night. You know, a boring family dinner with zero drama and nothing special to remember right up until it became the absolute last time anybody ever saw Nancy alive. Tommaso gave his mother-in-law a ride back afterward. Detectives say Nancy finally pulled up to her Catalina Foothills house right around 9:30 or 10 o'clock that night. Early timelines are slightly messy. Sheriff Nanos originally told CNN it was roughly 9:30 or 9:45, though official department records later locked in on 9:50. Either way, Tommaso was the final person to see her. He walked her up to the porch. Then he took off. Darkness swallowed the property completely, and at some point before dawn, broke way before missed calls started piling up, and panic officially set in. Somebody made their move. By the time Sunday morning rolled around, Nancy totally missed logging into her usual church live stream. On February 1st, a church friend noticed she was missing and alerted the family. Relatives rushed over, tearing through the house and yard, but turned up absolutely nothing. Around noon on February 1st, they dialed 911. Deputies arrived to a scene that screamed foul play immediately. Her cell phone was sitting right there inside. All her crucial daily meds were left behind too. Plus, investigators spotted a literal blood trail leading toward the porch steps. Labs later proved that blood was hers, and the Google Nest camera watching the doorway, somebody had completely disabled it. This wasn't an accident somebody showed up ready to work. It really didn't take local cops long to figure that out. Within just a few days, Sheriff Chris Nanos flat out told reporters they were treating this as an involuntary abduction from the property. Kidnapping, that was the official term going on the record now. She definitely hadn't just gotten lost walking around. Forget your standard missing person scenario. The physical evidence told a completely different story. We're talking about the pooled blood, the deliberately tampered camera. Add in the abandoned phone and pills, and everything screamed a highly calculated, targeted strike. Nanos felt confident the attacker zeroed in on her specifically. He called Nancy a vulnerable adult because of her terrible mobility, though her mind was still perfectly sharp. She couldn't walk 50 yards alone, he stated. On NBC Nightly News, he admitted they strongly suspected a targeted attack and understood the motive even without 100% proof. Reporters naturally pressed him, asking if there was any hard proof separating a random snatching from a calculated hit. His response was basically a stuttering dodge about chasing every lead and just not knowing for sure. But honestly, everyone could read between the lines. The intruder wasn't just some random opportunist passing through. They absolutely knew Nancy's routine, and they knew how to navigate her subdivision seamlessly. They had a very specific purpose. And within days of her vanishing, the massive media circus surrounding a high-profile disappearance totally exploded into overdrive. Savannah Guthrie, Nancy's daughter and the face of the Today Show, abruptly walked away from her anchor desk. Suddenly, the FBI was crashing the party alongside local detectives. Feds kicked things off by throwing down a $50,000 bounty for solid tips that could bring Nancy home and nail the perpetrators. That exact bounty got doubled to a cool $100,000 by February 12th, right as the manhunt dragged into its second grueling week. Cable news and armchair podcasters quickly locked onto their first target. It happened over on the Drop Dead Serious podcast. Ex-CNN and News Nation host Ashley Banfield claimed a police insider dropped a massive bomb regarding Tommaso CIONI. Yep, Annie's own husband, the exact guy who drove Nancy home right before she completely vanished into thin air. Banfield called him a prime suspect. She did backtrack slightly, admitting it was just an early working theory. She pointed out that cops always grill the family first. It was pure speculation, she claimed, not hard evidence. A police insider is saying Savannah's brother-in-law, the guy married to Annie Guthrie, might actually be a prime suspect here, she announced to her audience. But look, you can't just toss around prime suspect in a massive national media case and expect people to forget it. The damage was already done. Cops ended up towing Annie's car off their lot for evidence, surprisingly ignoring Tommaso's entirely. The sheriff's office brushed it off as standard investigative protocol. Fast forward to March 3rd, 2026. Police completely cleared the whole family and handed the car back to Annie. But honestly, the media barely covered that part, even though they went absolutely insane when the car was first seized. Combine that early car impound with Banfield's aggressive podcast claims, and internet sleuths completely lost their minds theorizing about the couple. Because here's the thing about the online true crime crowd, they move incredibly fast, and they absolutely do not hold back. The sheriff's department wasn't having it though. Nano stood at a podium and blasted Banfield's claims as totally reckless, flat out denying they had anyone listed as an official suspect. Sure, he admitted that basically nobody gets completely cleared during the messy first few days of a massive investigation. Calling someone a suspect this early is wildly irresponsible when they might actually be a victim themselves, he argued. The guy was crystal clear they didn't have a specific person of interest in their crosshairs yet. He practically begged reporters to show some basic professional restraint. Yeah, that warning did absolutely nothing to stop the relentless tidal wave of insane internet rumors burying Annie and Tommaso for weeks. Imagine living an absolute nightmare where your mother vanishes, your family shatters, and then, just to twist the knife, the internet decides you're somehow to blame for the whole terrifying ordeal. She never gave anyone a reason to think that. The proof against her absolutely non-existent. Police weren't pointing fingers, but the internet mob sure was spinning wild theories in chaotic live streams and obsessed Reddit threads. Then exactly 7 days after Nancy went missing, detectives suddenly showed up on Annie and Tommaso's front doorstep. That Saturday night, February 7th, 2026, local cops and at least one high-ranking deputy from the Pima County Sheriff's Department pulled up to their place. The house sits about 4 miles from Nancy's property. They tossed the place for hours starting around 8 until 10:30 that night. People magazine leaked the exact schedule through their inside contacts. A former federal agent named Tracy Walder later explained what usually goes down before these raids. Detectives probably asked Annie to let them in freely or just secured a warrant. It's standard operating procedure for a massive case like this. The sheriff's department kept their comments super short and careful, basically shrugging it off as just another routine step in the ongoing probe. When the missing woman was last spotted right at that very property, and the homeowner's husband was literally the final person to see her breathing. Checking out the house makes perfect sense from a cop's perspective. Searching that specific location was honestly pretty standard law enforcement behavior. Detectives always dig through the lives and homes of the victim's inner circle. It isn't an accusation, it's just basic police work. But try telling that to Annie Guthrie, who was juggling aggressive reporters while utterly paralyzed by her own mom's sudden vanishing. She was literally begging on camera for her mother's safe return. Having feds swarm her property just 7 days later didn't feel like standard protocol to her at all. It just piled more agony onto a totally devastating situation. Plus, it all went down on a Saturday night with nosy neighbors watching right before the block got completely overrun by internet sleuths, pointing their lenses at every single house. For the web detectives, this wasn't police work, it was pure entertainment. So on February 16th, 2026, Sheriff Chris Nanos finally released a surprisingly blunt update. It was wildly emotional compared to the usual stiff robotic press briefings you see during active manhunts. The guy honestly sounded completely fed up. Nanos didn't hold back, stating firmly the entire Guthrie family, including all siblings and spouses. They are absolutely cleared as suspects in this nightmare. These folks have been incredibly helpful and kind, and they are the actual victims here. But he kept going. Pushing any other narrative isn't just false, it's downright heartless. These people are suffering, plain and simple. I am literally begging you reporters do your jobs right and show a tiny shred of human decency. That press conference completely exonerated Annie Guthrie. Tommaso got cleared too. Same goes for Savannah. Cameron was off the hook as well. The head cop officially stood up there and completely removed the cloud of suspicion from everyone's shoulders. When a reporter from NBC News later pressed him on why he got so deeply personal at the podium, his response was totally unfiltered. He simply told them that people forget we actually bleed and that empathy is crucial. Every officer out there needs to protect the broken. I refuse to keep my mouth shut while internet trolls trash innocent people because honestly, protecting them is the whole point of wearing this badge. The top cop of Pima County literally stepped up to shield this grieving family, all while trying to manage the most massive disappearance case his team had ever seen. His point couldn't have been clearer, but somehow the internet trolls didn't quiet down at all. It just fueled more chaos. Sure, a few keyboard detectives backed off, but plenty of others acted like the sheriff's defense was some secret clue to decode. People kept lurking around Annie's street with their recording gear, totally convinced that invading a traumatized family's privacy somehow made them brilliant investigative journalists. Those creepy lenses didn't vanish just because the police cleared the family's name. The streamers followed the drama. And as far as TikTok and YouTube were concerned, the juicy drama was still happening right there in Tucson. April rolled around, marking over 10 grueling weeks since Nancy vanished. Still no handcuffs, no clear bad guy, and absolutely nothing solid to go on. Nobody was any closer to answering the real question, where was Nancy and who actually grabbed her? Back in February, the feds dropped ring camera video of this creepy masked guy walking right up to Nancy's porch the night she went missing. Cops guessed he was roughly 5'9" to 5'10", completely average build. He had gloves on and lugged around a 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack, the cheap kind you can only buy at Walmart. Police recovered around 16 different gloves scattered around Nancy's neighborhood, but one specific pair dumped about 2 miles away actually had some unidentified guy's DNA on it. They plugged that genetic profile straight into the federal system. Absolutely zero hits came back, but the weird saga of those gloves was far from over. By March 4th, 2026, the sheriff's office finally cracked the glove mystery. The DNA actually belonged to a random restaurant employee who worked right across the street. Detectives quickly ruled the poor cook out. Those gloves had the internet in an absolute chokehold for weeks, making national headlines, but they were literally totally unrelated to Nancy's kidnapping. Meanwhile, other physical evidence pulled straight from Nancy's living room was sitting in some private Florida lab just waiting on the final test results. Then came the ransom messages. On February 3rd, investigators received an intense letter demanding millions in Bitcoin if they ever wanted to see Nancy alive again. A local station, KGUN9, claimed the exact price was $6 million. February 5th and 9th passed silently, absolutely zero word from the actual abductors. A totally different email popped up at TMZ on February 11th. It clearly wasn't written by the original guy. This person swore they weren't the kidnapper, but claimed they knew who did it. The price for spilling the tea, 1 Bitcoin, which cost roughly $66,000 back then. On April 6th, the exact morning Savannah Guthrie came back to the Today Show after a 2-month break, TMZ got another tip. Some random sender swore they saw Nancy breathing in Sonora, Mexico. They actually claimed she was gone demanding half a Bitcoin just to drop a pin on her location. Naturally, the Guthrie family stepped up and publicly answered a couple of these direct messages. Savannah Guthrie finally sat down with Hoda Kotb on the Today Show, an incredibly raw interview airing March 26th and 27th, 2026, admitting she thought most notes were absolute garbage, except for 2 of them. Those couple of letters we actually replied to, she confessed on air. I really do think those ones are completely legitimate. She doubled down on her gut feeling about those specific letters being authentic, honestly. Then she brought up what detectives had suspected from day one, that this whole terrifying nightmare was ultimately just a desperate cash grab. Basically, someone assumed the family was loaded simply because of Savannah's fame. She remembered this heartbreaking chat with her brother early on in the case. He was absolutely convinced this was a ransom play that Nancy only got targeted directly because of her high-profile daughter. I kind of knew that, she told viewers. God, I hope it isn't true, but who knows, truthfully, we are totally in the dark. Look at what ex-FBI agent Jennifer Coffin-Daffer told Newsweek earlier. Detectives were apparently locking in on a ransom-driven abduction narrative right out of the gate. Purely a money grab, an extortion plot. She explained that was the running theory everywhere. That totally explains the massive media push. Putting the family on TV, dropping social media appeals cops carefully orchestrated all of it for maximum exposure. Things got weirder in April. A senior Pima County Sheriff's deputy anonymously leaked to the Daily Express US that the assigned homicide squad was being intentionally starved of resources. This whistleblower called the precinct a ghost town. 2 veteran detectives allegedly got bumped for rookies, sparking rumors that somebody higher up actually wanted to sabotage the whole investigation. Unsurprisingly, the sheriff's office ignored these explosive claims entirely. Sheriff Nanos just kept repeating the usual PR spin, swearing the case wasn't cold, and was still completely active. He promised his deputies were sitting on solid leads and absolutely wouldn't be backing down. Then there's this one specific date. Detectives kept circling back to January 11th, 2026. You really have to understand why that exact day matters. Cops had partnered with Google to pull some deleted clips off Nancy's home security camera. At first, Google thought a snapshot of the masked intruder might have been captured on January 11th. That's a full 20 days before she actually vanished, meaning this creep was likely staking out her house weeks before making a move. But tech companies backtrack, right? Google eventually walked it back, admitting they couldn't actually lock that eerie photo to January 11th or any other day. Nanos went on NBC News and local stations explaining how Google floated the date and then took it back. Even with a retraction, detectives absolutely refused to let it go. Come March, Nanos told reporters, "We honestly still think something went down on January 11th based on the FBI digging through digital files." Though he admitted it was mostly just an educated guess. What actual proof did they have? He wouldn't say. Just hinted the guy might have been there early and they were hunting down leads. I just can't stand here and promise you that yes, he was physically present at that exact moment. People living nearby did tell the press that federal agents came knocking for their January 11th security tapes. Unfortunately, they didn't spot a single helpful clue on any of those drives. Even her own family kept hammering on that detail. On March 21st, they begged Tucson locals to really jog their memories about that time frame. Whatever actually went down on January 11th, it's still completely hidden from the public. So the case wasn't officially dead yet, but there was obviously zero solid progress happening. Meanwhile, Tucson, this sleepy desert town that suddenly turned into ground zero for national media, and sleuths just sat there waiting. Because YouTube true crime, not a hobby anymore, it's a massive, booming business. Think about a mystery hitting this level. An anchor's missing mom, a terrifying abduction with ransom demands, masked creeps on video, and a $1 million bounty on on the table. The platform algorithms aggressively push this stuff. Sticking a camera in someone's yard makes financial sense when views explode and the ad money follows. If a creator manages to become the go-to source for a massive mystery like this, they'll lock down a loyal fan base that sticks around long after mainstream reporters pack up. It sounds sick, but an unsolved mystery pays way better than a solved one. Endings kill the hype. A cold case is basically an ATM that just keeps printing cash indefinitely. Now, some of the armchair detective work surrounding Nancy's disappearance was actually pretty solid. You had independent researchers pulling in real experts, forensic scientists, DNA specialists, retired cops, and seasoned lawyers. A handful of channels pumped out incredibly well-researched daily updates. They cited actual sources and seriously tackled the available police records. That whole internet sleuth space isn't just one hive mind. You've got brilliant researchers working right alongside absolute chaotic clout chasers. That difference becomes wildly important when you remember actual human beings are trapped inside this real-life nightmare. Things got out of hand fast in Tucson. This wasn't just podcasting anymore. People literally flew out to film themselves stalking through Nancy's quiet street. YouTubers were actively harassing locals. Streamers just camped out at crime scenes, keeping their cameras rolling for hours on end. Keep in mind, the sheriff's department had explicitly begged the public and rogue search parties to back off. Her family certainly never invited the circus, and the folks living nearby had absolutely taken notice. Eventually, official complaints started flooding into the police station. The chaos happening over where her relatives lived had crossed a major boundary, and neighbors were totally done keeping their mouths shut about it. The tipping point didn't even start with the cops. It kicked off at a tense community board meeting right inside Nancy's own neighborhood. We're talking about the Catalina foothills, her home for decades, the exact block she vanished from. People living there held a massive sit-down right before April 13th just to address all the madness. Look, the Pima County Sheriff's Department actually showed up to that meeting. And according to KVOA News, for Tucson's April 13th, 2026 broadcast, those locals shared one brutally specific grievance. Some random YouTuber was outright harassing folks in the neighborhood. Honestly, I'm not even paraphrasing here. That is the exact terminology used by KVOA. People were totally fed up with an internet personality stalking their streets. Not some massive news network or giant media fleets, just one single creator. Or at the very least, it was the relentless chaos of one person's channel that finally drove these exhausted folks to drag cops into their normally peaceful HOA meeting. Law enforcement didn't just stumble into that gathering by accident. They were already walking a tightrope trying to run a massive kidnapping probe on a block that had turned into an absolute circus during the 10 weeks since Nancy vanished. They threw up completely restricted parking zones all around the Guthrie property. The sheriff literally begged everyone from curious locals to amateur sleuths to just back off and let detectives work. So yeah, the neighborhood was finally fighting back. But that was only the first grievance. The next one hit from a totally different area involving a completely different part of the Guthrie family. And this one was personal. Annie Guthrie marched straight to the Pima County Sheriff's Department. She officially filed paperwork against internet sleuths loitering outside her house. That is the hard, verified reality, confirmed by police, and broadcast by KVOA News 4 Tucson on April 13th, 2026. And it was totally backed up by Newsweek, USA Today, plus several other major outlets shortly after. Annie Guthrie, Nancy's daughter. Tommaso Chion's wife, a deeply private woman navigating the terrifying, sudden disappearance of her mother. She suffered through police tearing up her house, her car getting towed away, and endless internet rumors that even the local sheriff blasted as incredibly vicious. And she took all that frustration straight to the cops to formally press charges. We still do not know the exact details of the awful stuff she outlined in those legal documents. Authorities are staying super quiet about the exact events Annie laid out. Honestly, the police have not officially named a single online creator responsible for this absolute mess yet. Here is what we do know for sure. The harassment happened right in Annie and Tommaso's own Tucson neighborhood, which sits miles away from Nancy's upscale Catalina Foothills subdivision. Let that sink in for a second. Annie Guthrie is literally just a normal person. She never asked for a dozen cameras in her face. She's just a grieving daughter. She is trapped in this completely endless, agonizing police investigation into her mom's terrifying abduction. Zero answers. Absolutely none of the comfort needed to even pretend her life is somehow normal again. Whatever was happening right outside her front door was so incredibly toxic and relentless. She didn't just hop online to politely beg random internet trolls for a little basic decency. No lengthy Instagram statements, no tearful press conferences. She marched her way right down to the local police station instead. She pulled the one legal lever left for regular folks facing severe stalking. She literally demanded state intervention. That is a massive move. Bold, direct. Not just sitting quietly by. This kind of sheer panic actually has a specific legal definition, and Annie Guthrie made damn sure they documented it by throwing it on paper for the cops to see. Over on the Today Show, Savannah Guthrie broke down while talking to Hoda Kotb. She called the relentless internet rumors destroying her family completely suffocating. All those vicious little theories and nasty whispers about her own siblings just stacked trauma over trauma. She was baffled by it, flat out admitted she'd never wrap her head around it. She was totally speechless. But think about it. If that is the polished, perfectly edited network TV version of how much this nightmare hurts their family, then imagine the raw, unfiltered reality. The desperate version someone frantically files with a police desk clerk on a random Tuesday. That right there is the dark, actual truth. How did the Pima County authorities handle this massive wave of panic from Nancy's neighbors and Annie? They did the exact same thing for both. Heavier patrols. Way more cops visible at both locations. Authorities explicitly confirmed this exact move directly to KVOA news teams. Officers flooded those streets because residents wouldn't stop complaining. There was zero doubt about what the cops did. This wasn't some basic bureaucratic box-checking exercise. The precinct was literally yanking cops off regular duties and burning valuable shift hours. They wasted squad car mileage guarding quiet suburban streets against internet trolls, all while juggling a massive missing person case, swallowing hundreds of detectives and countless scattered clues. Stop and think about the math here for a second. By early February 2026, over 400 detectives were grinding away at the Nancy Guthrie mystery. Police were completely drowning in wild leads. Nanos claimed they were sorting through 40 to 50,000 tips while DNA labs kept grinding away. Cops were staring at endless security tapes. Detectives were sprinting down 20 different rabbit holes at once. Every single badge stuck babysitting a neighborhood from vloggers meant one less person catching the bad guy. Every cruiser doing slow laps outside Annie's house. That is a car not hunting down a violent abductor in a terrifying mystery that literally has the whole squad sweating bullets. Honestly, boosting the police presence totally made sense. Shutting down scary stalkers is literally what we pay our local cops to do anyway. Protecting normal citizens. Especially when those innocent people are paralyzed by grief, getting blamed for crimes they didn't commit, and constantly dodging lenses shoved in their faces by true crime fanatics. Shielding them from that toxic madness is exactly what the badge actually stands for. Still, you can't ignore the math of those wasted hours. Because look at what this whole true crime circus achieved in Tucson by April 2026. Absolutely no brilliant case-cracking clues. Zero heroic witnesses jogging their memories from a late-night stream. Instead, just two terrified neighborhoods, double the police patrols, and a furious legal grievance filed by the heartbroken kid of the exact victim these internet sleuths pretend they want to save. Former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffender. She is basically the most grounded, reliable police expert talking about the Nancy Guthrie tragedy on television since the whole nightmare started. She completely nailed the weird split in public opinion when Newsweek called her up about those extra police cruisers. You will always find folks who couldn't care less, she explained. Then there are those who despise the absolute chaos, shoving cameras in faces, aggressive interrogations, and just straight up bullying. But then you get this weird crowd cheering them on. Their logic, they genuinely believe this chaotic circus somehow keeps Nancy Guthrie relevant in the headlines. Honestly, that perfectly sums up the bizarre, deeply uncomfortable reality of this entire situation. Look at the stakes. You've got innocent neighbors and broken relatives who view these internet detectives as nothing but brutal tormentors, a relentless daily reminder that their deepest trauma is just monetization. But check out the flip side. Fans who absolutely swear this relentless spotlight, the endless video breakdowns, the constant noise. They're convinced refusing to back down is the only thing keeping the cops sweating, especially since 10 long weeks just dragged by with absolutely zero arrest. Coffin Daffer refused to pick a side for Newsweek. She just stated the facts. Honestly, both things are totally true. These online sleuths have definitely managed to keep Nancy's story fully alive. They forced people to remember her even while the cops were coming up totally empty on leads. Keeping the spotlight burning actually matters for cases that usually fade out. Meanwhile, Annie Guthrie formally reported severe harassment to the sheriff. Both things happened right on the exact same block, targeting the exact same grieving family. Here's what the armchair detectives honestly believe. Assuming their absolute best intentions naturally, they figure nonstop media hype basically forces the cops to work harder. It stops the tragedy from rotting in a dusty file cabinet. Plus, it might scare up random witnesses who otherwise would have kept their mouths shut. And yeah, they've got history backing them up here. Dead ends have completely cracked open before. Secret spill. Cases catch massive second wins just because some random podcaster decided to dig up a tragedy the regular news dumped. That impact is totally legit. Not made up at all, it's honestly a massive positive these groups bring. But check out Tucson, the very family the internet crowd swore they were protecting. Actually, let's focus on one specific relative. Someone who never begged for backup, never invited a single camera. She just watched her name get dragged through unhinged theories stuff the sheriff called dangerous until she finally begged the cops to shut it down. Annie didn't post a tearful vlog begging to be left alone. She went directly to the Pima County sheriff. She used the actual legal route for citizens facing intense stalking. She basically begged the state to shield her from a mob convinced they were her saviors. The sheer irony there, absolutely massive. These online sleuths defend crashing Tucson by saying they're fighting for a lost woman's justice. They see themselves as street activists doing the heavy lifting. We show up so Nancy stays relevant. We're holding feet to the fire. We refuse to let the country just shrug and forget. Yet the blunt, legally binding reply from a blood relative of that very victim dialing the authorities to demand these people get chased away. That ugly crash between what these fans claim they're doing and the nightmare they're actually causing. Easily the wildest twist this tragedy seen. This tragedy has seen lately. Forget lab results. Forget a real ransom demand or a fresh target. A broken daughter marched into a precinct, screaming she was done. So the cops parked cruisers right outside. Which brings up a brutal question these armchair detectives almost never pause to ask. What do the actual victims really want? Annie never begged for camera lenses pointing at her house. She didn't invite randoms to live stream her block. Not once did she release a statement welcoming content makers to camp out in her yard just to keep the cops highly motivated. Assuming the relatives actually crave this circus. Thinking they're thankful viewing total privacy, invasion as some noble crusade done entirely on their behalf, just wild. That's a massive leap. The internet crowd just forced onto them. Screamed it loudly. Never once asked permission. Look, there's a totally decent side to this subculture. The folks who quietly feed tips to the FBI. They analyze footage at home, share leads respectfully, and publish smart content. All while treating the grieving family with total dignity. That specific crowd genuinely helps. But then you get the weirdos camping on Annie's lawn, which is exactly why she called the sheriff. Yet all this neighborhood drama does absolutely zero to help find a missing Nancy Guthrie. Period. The 84-year-old woman vanished the night of January 31st, 2026. She's still missing. Not a single target named. Absolutely nobody behind bars yet. That masked creep caught on the porch camera. The guy rocking that distinct backpack and those weird gloves leaving his spit behind. Ran it through the federal system's total dead end. Complete ghost. Plus that $1 million bounty the Guthries announced in February 2026, still untouched. Labs are still crunching evidence grabbed from the house. Genealogy whiz CeCe Moore even went on News Nation with Brian Enton. She strongly urged cops to march back into that crime scene and hunt down fresh biological traces. It's absolutely insane to think the intruder didn't leave genetic material behind. She stated, "I really pray they're testing a ton of other stuff pulled from Nancy's place." Moore pointed out that major lab work is painfully slow, especially when techs probably bag dozens or even hundreds of tiny little swabs right at the start. Savannah finally walked back onto the Today Show set on April 6, 2026. 2 brutal months completely away. Seeing her on screen fired up Jennifer Coffin-Daffer. She immediately posted on X shooting a very direct warning at the masked creep from the tape. Savannah showed up rocking bright yellow and huge smiles, Coffin-Daffer posted. She absolutely crushed it. Porch guy snatched her mom but clearly couldn't steal her soul. You lost man. Meanwhile, the relatives keep begging Tucson locals to stay completely laser-focused. Back in March, the Guthries dropped a heavy statement on Savannah's socials. "We're basically begging everyone to double down on our mom. Somebody holds the missing piece." Honestly, a local could be sitting on massive clues without having a single clue themselves. Seriously dig through your doorbell cams. Check old diaries, weird texts, any tiny chat feeling creepy lately. Got a tip about Nancy vanishing? Dial the feds immediately at 1-800-CALL, FBI. That is 1-800-225-5324. Hit tips.fbi.gov. The Pima Sheriff's Line, 520-35149. The 88 Crime Anonymous hotline works perfectly too. Look, internet sleuths crashing active kidnapping zones. Hardly a fresh concept. Been going on for decades, but the sheer size lightning speed and heavy cash flow driving it today, totally new. Bedroom YouTubers who once just read scripts are literally buying plane tickets now to broadcast directly from active yellow tape. Imagine strangers camping on your front lawn with cameras rolling nonstop right after your world shatters. YouTube literally pays people to do this chasing watch time, farming subscribers and raking in ad money just by hovering like vultures over a high-profile tragedy. Get uncomfortably close to the trauma and the algorithm practically hands you a massive paycheck. Does treating real life like a movie set actually help anyone at all? Honestly, Coffin Daffer nailed the reality of it. It totally depends on your perspective. Sitting on your couch 3 states away after cable news drops the story. Those amateur streams might be the only way you stay looped in. But try being Annie Guthrie for a second. Your mom is missing and your street has been turned into a paranoid reality show for true crime junkies month after grueling month. Meanwhile, you're dodging insane online rumors so bad, the local sheriff had to publicly shut them down. That constant camera glare is exactly why she eventually marched downtown to file harassment charges. The legal gray area here is wild. Sure, basic harassment laws exist, but they were drafted way before anyone figured out how to monetize loitering outside a grieving family's front door. Nowadays, harassing Annie's neighborhood is quite literally a business model. You stick around longer, you churn out way more footage. Pumping out extra videos drives up those view counts fast. And stacking up views means fatter checks for both the creator and the platform itself. That heartbroken woman hiding inside isn't agreeing to be part of a business deal. She is the product. The Pima County Sheriff's Department is literally burning up precious patrol hours right in the middle of a kidnapping. Cops are guarding 2 regular neighborhoods just to shield traumatized relatives from internet sleuths who swear they are trying to help solve the case. Let that absolute insanity sink in for a second. We are hitting month 3 of the Nancy Guthrie mystery with 0 solid answers. Where did she go? Who grabbed her? What went down inside that home? Ever since Tommaso Cioni drove off late January 31st, local deputies and the FBI have been grinding away testing DNA and chasing down every possible lead. Sheriff Nanos absolutely refuses to call this case cold, and her relatives agree. Meanwhile, somewhere across Tucson neighborhood, associations are brawling over rogue YouTubers, while a desperate daughter files official police complaints. Cruisers are forced to monitor streets that should be dead silent, all while somebody out there is holding onto a vital secret. Maybe even multiple people know the truth. Or perhaps a random person has been sitting on a massive clue for months, totally unaware of how important it actually is. Then you have the broader southern Arizona community. Those are the exact folks Nancy's relatives pleaded with during their huge public statement back in March. Forget the internet detectives and massive news networks. They were begging the locals, the ones driving past her street early this year, the Walmart employees stocking those exact Ozark Trail backpacks, or maybe a cashier ringing up some dark gloves. Even just a neighbor who spotted a sketchy sedan parked out front right before February 1st and totally brushed it off as nothing at all. Those local residents are the exact missing puzzle piece detectives need right now. When the family spoke out, they weren't just reading some highly polished corporate PR script drafted by lawyers. It was a desperate cry from exhausted folks who absolutely refused to quit. They know raw facts are what solve crimes, not viral videos, and definitely not invasive live streams. Real facts, the kind of stuff you dial into a tip line that immediately gets kicked up to the feds. Maybe a cashier recalling a face from last winter, or a neighbor living 2 miles down the road with unexamined driveway footage. That's the entire goal. If you've got absolutely anything, a video, a weird memory, or a conversation from January, call 1-800-CALL-FBI or visit tips.fbi.gov. Alternatively, dial 520-351-4988. Nancy is still out there and her family refuses to stop searching. Look, if you actually learned something today or got a fresh perspective that totally shifted your view on things, stick around. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next big update, and definitely pass this along to anyone else tracking the investigation. Honestly, every single person who keeps paying attention adds another crucial set of eyes that might crack this wide open. We've got way more to cover on the Guthrie situation, and we aren't backing down. Quick disclaimer, this project was made strictly for educational reasons. Every detail we shared comes straight from verified public records or official statements available right now. Nobody mentioned in this video has actually been formally charged or convicted of breaking the law. To be crystal clear, Sheriff Chris Nanos officially completely cleared both Annie Guthrie and Tommaso Cioni as suspects on February 16, 2026. The cops haven't publicly dropped any names regarding the YouTubers mentioned in those harassment complaints, so we definitely aren't pointing fingers at any specific creators in this breakdown either. Got actual clues about Nancy? Reach out to the FBI at 1-800-2255324 or use tips.fbi.gov. You can also ring the Pima County Sheriff at 520-35149. In moments of tragedy, our first duty is not to judge, it is to care. This story reminds us how quickly pain can multiply when fear rumors and public curiosity replace compassion. A family was already living through every loved one's worst nightmare, yet outside voices turned their suffering into spectacle. That is a lesson our society cannot afford to ignore. We live in an age where opinions travel faster than facts. One careless accusation, one reckless post, one cruel theory can wound innocent people who are already broken by grief. Real humanity begins when we choose restraint over reaction, truth over entertainment, and empathy over suspicion. Behind every headline is a real mother, a real daughter, a real family carrying unimaginable sorrow. This is why we must teach our communities, especially young people, that being informed is not the same as being cruel, and being curious is not permission to be heartless. Words have power. So do silence, patience, and respect. The deepest educational message here is simple, but unforgettable. When someone is suffering, do not become another source of pain. Be the voice that protects dignity, honors truth, and remembers that compassion is still the strongest form of justice.